Good morning. You're going to hear a lot of voices in your life. Some will cheer you on. Others will try to drown you out. And the hardest part, learning which ones to listen to. But here's something I've learned. The voice that matters most is the one inside you. The one that dares to dream when the world says play it safe. Bet on yourself before you're ready. Most people wait. They wait for the right moment, the perfect opportunity, the guarantee of success. They tell themselves they'll act when things calm down, when they've learned a little more, when they feel more confident. But here's the truth: that moment rarely comes. The conditions you're waiting for may never fully align, and the longer you wait, the quieter that instinct, that bold inner voice becomes. Betting on yourself before you're ready isn't a leap of foolishness. It's a recognition that readiness is not a state you reach, but a decision you make. No one is truly ready when they begin something that matters. The people who create change, who innovate, who push the world forward, all started with more questions than answers. They didn't wait to be chosen. They didn't wait until they were the smartest person in the room. They started where they were, with what they had, and trusted that the next step would appear once they committed to the first one. Betting on yourself doesn't mean you'll know how to do everything. It means you're willing to learn. It means you trust that your vision, your values, and your determination are enough to carry you through what you don't yet know. The gap between who you are today and who you want to become isn't filled with permission slips or waiting lists. It's filled with steps, imperfect, messy, sometimes scary steps that only you can take. There's a false belief that readiness comes from experience. But real growth often works in reverse. The experience comes from doing. The confidence comes from acting. Clarity comes from motion. You don't become a leader and then step up. You step up, and that's how you become a leader. You don't wait until you have a flawless plan. You take what you've got and refine as you go. Waiting for everything to feel right before you act is like waiting for the wind to stop before setting sail. It's movement that gives you direction. The world doesn't reward potential. It rewards execution. It rewards those who move forward when others hesitate. And more often than not, the reason they hesitate is fear. Not a failure, but of being seen trying before they feel ready. There's a vulnerability in acting before you feel fully prepared. There's a risk in stepping out and saying, "I believe in this," when the outcome is uncertain. But those are the moments that define you. When you bet on yourself, you begin to change the narrative. You're no longer asking others to validate your worth. You're proving it to yourself through action. You're no longer waiting for someone to invite you in. You're building your own table. That kind of belief is magnetic. People respond to conviction. They rally around vision. They follow people who move first. You will make mistakes. You'll get things wrong. That's part of the price. But you'll learn more in 1 year of bold action than in 10 years of playing it safe. Each misstep teaches you something no book or mentor can. Each challenge builds resilience. And slowly, the person who once questioned their ability becomes someone others turn to for answers. The ones who rise aren't always the most talented. They're the ones who start. They're the ones who keep going. They're the ones who understand that fear is not a stop sign. It's a signal that you're on the edge of something meaningful. And it's in those moments, right before the leap, that your future is shaped. The biggest breakthroughs happen just outside your comfort zone. Not in a place of panic, but in that space where you're unsure and slightly unsteady. That's where creativity lives. That's where growth happens. When you choose to bet on yourself, you accept the discomfort of growth over the illusion of security. You realize that playing small doesn't protect you from failure. It guarantees it. Too many people spend their lives preparing, refining, adjusting, waiting for some moment of divine clarity to tell them the time is right. But boldness works differently. Boldness says, "I'll figure it out on the way." Boldness says, "I don't need every answer. I just need to start." Boldness doesn't look for guarantees. It creates opportunities. You may feel underqualified. You may feel like you're not the smartest, not the most experienced, not the best. That's okay. It's not about being the best. It's about being willing. Willing to try. Willing to fail. Willing to keep showing up. When you bet on yourself, you're not promising that everything will go perfectly. You're committing to stay in the arena, no matter what. That kind of decision changes the way you carry yourself. It changes the way others see you. You begin to move differently. Not with arrogance, but with clarity. You're no longer driven by fear, but by purpose. And here's the paradox: the moment you decide to bet on yourself, before you feel ready, is often the moment when everything begins to shift. Doors open. Ideas sharpen. People take notice, not because you were finally ready, but because you finally acted. Progress matters more than perfection. Perfection is a tempting trap. It wears a beautiful mask. It looks like excellence. It feels like high standards. It sounds like wisdom. But behind that mask, perfection is fear in disguise. Fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of not being enough. Perfection tells you to wait, to polish, to rehearse one more time, to delay launching, to keep your idea safe until it's flawless. But progress plays by different rules. Progress says start now, fix as you go, learn in real time. Progress values momentum over mastery. There's a point where striving for perfection becomes a form of procrastination. You rewrite the same paragraph, redesign the same interface, rehearse the same pitch, not because it's not ready, but because you're afraid of what will happen when it finally leaves your hands. But the truth is, nothing changes until something moves. An imperfect step forward is more powerful than 100 perfect ideas that never leave your notebook. Progress doesn't wait for confidence. It creates it. Some of the most successful products, companies, books, and breakthroughs began with rough drafts. The first versions were awkward, incomplete, filled with bugs or holes or weak points. But they were alive. And because they existed, they could evolve. Because they were real, they could be improved. Perfection is static, it doesn't move. Progress is alive, it learns, adapts, and grows. Every step forward, even the small ones, becomes a building block. Every version teaches you something the last one didn't. You don't get better by getting it perfect. You get better by getting it out there. People spend years waiting to feel ready. They tell themselves they'll start once they know more, once they've refined their idea, once they've gathered more data, more resources, more approval. But perfection never tells you the truth. It keeps moving the finish line. What was almost there becomes still not good enough. What was just one more tweak becomes just one more year. Meanwhile, progress whispers something quieter, but far more powerful. Ship it, share it, build the next one. Every time you choose progress, you make a small promise to yourself. You say, I'm not here to impress, I'm here to improve. That mindset is transformative. It unlocks energy. It gives you permission to try, to test, to experiment. It opens the door to feedback, to iteration, to real growth. You stop aiming for a masterpiece and start aiming for momentum. And in doing so, you often get closer to excellence than perfection ever would have allowed. Perfection is rigid. It can't handle change. It's threatened by mistakes. But progress is flexible. It absorbs feedback. It welcomes failure as part of the process. When you embrace progress, you don't crumble when things go wrong. You adapt. You don't get stuck in loops of second guessing. You course correct. The people who build lasting things are rarely the ones who got it all right the first time. They're the ones who kept moving, who kept learning, who kept showing up even when their work wasn't perfect. Progress demands humility. It asks you to release your ego and accept that your first draft won't be your best. It challenges you to stop hiding behind potential and start producing results. That can be uncomfortable, but it's also liberating. Because once you let go of the need to be perfect, you're free to start. You're free to be seen. You're free to create with urgency and honesty. Some of the most valuable lessons come from doing something before you're fully ready. The real education isn't in the theory, it's in the practice. It's in the missed shots, the broken code, the launch that didn't go as planned. Every misstep teaches you something that standing on the sidelines never will. And the more you move forward, the more you realize that waiting for perfect conditions is a luxury you can't afford. The world moves fast. Opportunities don't linger. And often, the cost of delay is greater than the cost of imperfection. Progress is generous. It rewards consistency. It multiplies effort. When you show up every day and push your work a little further, the results compound. One idea leads to another. One prototype opens up new possibilities. One conversation sparks unexpected insight. What once felt overwhelming starts to feel manageable. You begin to trust the process. And in that trust, you develop something more important than perfection: momentum. The pursuit of perfection is lonely. It keeps you isolated, waiting in silence for the day when your work will be worthy. But progress invites connection. It invites feedback. It allows others to engage with what you're building, to help shape it, to be part of the journey. People don't resonate with perfect. They resonate with real. They want to see the process. They want to witness growth. Your willingness to share imperfect work gives others permission to do the same. There's a myth that great work comes from long stretches of isolation, from sitting quietly until brilliance arrives. But in truth, great work is shaped in motion. It comes from testing, shipping, iterating. It comes from the courage to release something incomplete and say, here it is so far. What do you see? That kind of openness isn't weakness. It's the seed of mastery. The most iconic creators, builders, and thinkers didn't wait for perfection. They moved with urgency. They embraced the rough draft, the beta version, the early launch. They knew that the longer an idea stays in your head, the more it gets warped by fear and fantasy. It's only when you bring it into the world that it begins to evolve into what it could truly be. Originality beats imitation. There's a certain comfort in following what works. Imitating a successful model feels safe. It gives you the illusion of certainty, the idea that if you repeat the formula, you'll repeat the result. But imitation is always a step behind. It lacks soul, it lacks spark, and most importantly, it lacks you. Originality, on the other hand, is dangerous in the best way. It's unpredictable, it's bold, and it's filled with risk. But it's the only path that leads to something truly new, something truly yours. Being original doesn't mean creating something the world has never seen. It means expressing a perspective only you can bring. It's not about being different for the sake of being different. It's about being honest. When you choose originality, you're choosing to trust your voice. You're choosing to say, this is what I believe, this is how I see the world, and this is the way I want to build it. That kind of clarity resonates. It cuts through the noise. In a world flooded with replicas, originality stands out. People can feel it. They're drawn to what's real, what's raw, what hasn't been filtered to match a trend or fit a mold. Originality has an energy that can't be faked. It shows up in the work. It shows up in the details, in the decisions, in the spirit behind the product or message or idea. It can't be reverse engineered because it comes from within. The temptation to imitate is strongest when you feel uncertain. When you're starting something new, when you're searching for traction, when you're looking around at others who seem to be further ahead. It's easy to think the answer lies in copying what they did. But their path is not your path. Their formula was designed for their strengths, their timing, their vision. Even if you match it step for step, it won't fit, because it's not you. And the longer you imitate, the more you lose your own voice. There's a cost to imitation that no one talks about. It drains your confidence. It puts you in a cycle of comparison. It teaches you to look outward for validation instead of inward for direction. And over time, it makes you doubt your instincts. You start shaping your ideas based on what might get clicks, likes, praise, instead of what feels true. You stop building for purpose and start building for approval. That's a hollow road, and it always ends the same way, with burnout or boredom. Originality requires courage. It asks you to trust ideas that no one else sees yet. It asks you to speak in a voice that hasn't been tested. It asks you to lead without a map, and it's often lonely. When you do something truly original, there's no blueprint. There's no reassurance. Sometimes there's no applause, at least not at first. But there's something else. There's alignment. There's the sense that you're finally building something that reflects who you really are. And that's a deeper kind of fulfillment. Some of the most impactful ideas were misunderstood at first. They were dismissed, ridiculed, ignored. Not because they weren't good, but because they were different, because they challenged expectations, because they broke the rules. That's what originality does. It disrupts. It introduces new language, new patterns, new ways of thinking. It makes people uncomfortable before it makes them inspired. And yet, over time, it's the original thinkers who leave the longest mark. Not because they were perfect, but because they were brave. Because they were willing to take the risk of being themselves. They weren't trying to be better than anyone else. They were trying to be more fully themselves. That's the real competition, not between you and someone else, but between who you are and who you're capable of becoming if you stop trying to blend in. Originality is also a process. It doesn't show up fully formed. It's something you uncover by doing the work, by making things, by following your curiosity. You don't find your voice by thinking. You find it by speaking, by writing, by designing, by building. You don't need permission to be original. You need practice. You need repetition. You need the willingness to sound awkward at first, to be misunderstood, to get it wrong. Because only through that process do you begin to uncover the edge, the place where your ideas are no longer derivative, where they begin to breathe on their own. The world is changing fast. Trends are born and die in the same week. Strategies that worked yesterday feel outdated today. But originality is timeless. It doesn't depend on the algorithm. It doesn't chase what's popular. It creates what's meaningful. And in doing so, It carves a space that only you can fill. That's not something you can steal or borrow or replicate. It has to be earned. It has to be lived. When you commit to originality, you also commit to patience, because the world may not understand you right away. But the right people will. The ones who value depth over hype. The ones who are searching for something true. They will find your work, not because it was perfect, but because it was real, because it reflected something they felt but couldn't express, because it carried a fingerprint they hadn't seen before. And that connection is deeper than popularity. You have a choice every time you create, whether to echo what's already out there or to speak in your own tone, whether to follow the well-worn path or to carve your own, whether to build what the market expects or what your soul insists on. And that choice, repeated over time, becomes the story you leave behind. Courage means moving forward despite doubt. Doubt is part of the process. It's there at the beginning, before the first step is taken. It lingers in the quiet moments, in the pauses between decisions. It questions your timing, your qualifications, your ideas. It whispers that you're not ready, that you might fail, that others are better suited. But courage doesn't wait for doubt to disappear. Courage walks alongside it. It doesn't silence the fear. It learns how to move anyway. Courage is often misunderstood as confidence. People think it means feeling strong, clear, and sure. But most acts of courage are done with trembling hands. They happen in the middle of confusion. They come with no guarantee. The people who appear fearless are usually the ones who've simply decided not to let fear make their decisions. They feel the doubt, acknowledge it, and still choose action. That choice, again and again, is what builds true courage. When you're starting something that matters, doubt will almost always be present. That's how you know it matters. The weight you feel, the questions in your mind, the discomfort in your chest, it all signals that you're touching something meaningful. You're stretching beyond your comfort zone. You're standing at the edge of what's familiar, and that edge is where growth lives. It's where transformation happens. Courage is what lets you cross that edge, even when your footing feels unsteady. Moving forward despite doubt means accepting uncertainty. It means choosing progress over perfection. It means making decisions with incomplete information, trusting your instincts when logic alone won't carry you. It means understanding that doubt doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means you're human. Every creator, leader, innovator, artist, and entrepreneur has faced moments where they question everything. What separates them is not the absence of those questions, but their willingness to act anyway. There's a moment before every leap when the mind searches for reasons to stop. It scans the past for failures, the future for risks, the present for limitations. It tries to protect you. That's its job. But sometimes protection looks like hesitation, and hesitation turns into paralysis. Courage breaks that cycle. It interrupts the pattern. It says, yes, this might not work, but what if it does? It focuses on potential, not just probability. It bets on the value of the effort, not just the outcome. Doubt can be loud. It can disguise itself as logic, as realism, as caution. But underneath it is often a deeper fear, the fear of being seen, of standing out, of not measuring up. Courage steps into that spotlight anyway. It lets you be visible. It lets your work be seen, not because you're invincible, but because you're committed. Courage is not about being certain. It's about being willing, willing to try, willing to risk being wrong, willing to show up without knowing how it will all unfold. Some of the most important moves you make will happen while doubt is shouting in your ear. You'll start a project you don't feel qualified for. You'll say yes to an opportunity you think you're not ready for. You'll take on a challenge that seems bigger than your current ability, and you'll do it with the understanding that growth often feels like struggle. That discomfort is not a sign to stop. It's a signal to keep going. Courage is also quiet. It doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's just writing the next page, making the next call, speaking up when it would be easier to stay silent. It's having hard conversations. It's telling the truth when it's inconvenient. It's holding your ground when everyone else is moving the other way. These moments don't come with applause. They often go unnoticed. But over time, they shape who you are. They build integrity. They develop grit. There is no path to mastery that doesn't pass through fear and uncertainty. There is no breakthrough without friction. The people who build lasting impact are the ones who stayed in motion, even when the voice of doubt was loudest. They kept building, kept showing up, kept refining, not because they always felt strong, but because they chose to keep going. Courage doesn't erase doubt. It just makes you bigger than it. Moving forward despite doubt is how all things begin. Every invention, every company, every song, every book, every movement started as an idea that someone doubted, even its creator. But they took the first step anyway. And that step led to another. And then another, each one more certain than the last. That is how belief is built, not in a sudden moment of clarity, but in a series of decisions to keep going. The truth is, the work that matters most will never feel completely safe. If it feels easy, it's probably not bold enough. The projects that push you, the ones that call on your full potential, will come with resistance. That resistance is part of the price. Courage pays it willingly. It understands that doubt is a companion, not a master. That fear is part of the ride, not a reason to cancel the trip. The more you practice moving through doubt, the stronger you become. Not just in what you do, but in how you see yourself. You begin to trust your ability to navigate the unknown. You stop waiting for certainty. You start creating your own clarity through action. You realize that every time you move forward, you are not just shaping your work, you're shaping who you are.